They laughed when I still used a notepad. One day, the CTO said, "You're analog in a digital world." They let me go. 6 weeks later, a cyberattack hit their system. The only backup was in my notebook. When I mailed it back with a note, the boardroom fell into chaos because I'll never forget the way they looked at me. Like I was a joke. The old guy with the notepad stuck in the past. It started small. Side comments in meetings, little jabs when I'd pull out my notebook instead of typing on a laptop. The CTO, a slick guy named Eric, loved to make it a running gag. "Analog in a digital world," he'd say, smirking. He even said it in front of the whole floor once, right after a meeting. Everyone laughed. I just sat there, writing, not looking up. But I wasn't just doodling. That notebook was my lifeline. I tracked everything in it. Server configurations, vendor contacts, emergency protocols, security architecture maps, employee permissions, system logs, things they thought didn't matter because they had their shiny cloud services and AI tools. They never thought about what would happen if the system went down. They never listened when I said we needed hard backups, real contingency plans. They just looked at me like I was wasting paper. Then, 6 weeks after they fired me, the cyberattack hit. It was brutal. Some ransomware gang got in deep, encrypted everything. Emails, financials, customer data, all gone. They tried to recover from the cloud, but their backups were corrupted too. Nothing worked. I wasn't there, but I can imagine the panic. Phones ringing off the hook, systems offline, clients furious. The company was bleeding cash every minute. Then, one morning, a package showed up at their office. A plain brown envelope. Inside was my old notebook. I'd mailed it overnight, no return address. On the front page, I left a yellow sticky note. All it said was, "Told you so." But that wasn't the end of it. At the back of the notebook, I had left something extra. A list. It wasn't just system details. It was everything I'd been quietly tracking for years. Every shady deal the execs had tried to hide, the off-the-books payments, the backdated contracts, the fake invoices, the shell companies. The board members' side hustles they thought nobody knew about. The names of the people they'd screwed over, vendors, ex-employees, even a few investors. I'd written it all down. Dates, names, amounts. They didn't just lose their data in the attack. They lost control of the whole damn company. I heard the boardroom turned into a war zone. People shouting, slamming doors, threatening lawsuits. The CEO tried to keep it quiet, but word got out. Shareholders started asking questions. The press started sniffing around. And Eric, the guy who loved calling me analog, he was the first to go. Walked out with a cardboard box while security watched. I watched it unfold from a distance, sitting in a small diner a few blocks away. Sipping my coffee, flipping through a fresh notepad, watching the headlines roll in. I didn't say a word. Not yet. The thing is, I didn't even send the notebook right away. I waited. I wanted them to feel it first, the helplessness, the fear. I knew they'd try everything. I knew the CTO, Eric, would scramble. He'd call in every consultant, every cybersecurity firm he could find. They'd all tell him the same thing: the data was gone. No backups. No restores. Nothing. I had worked there for 12 years. 12 years of building that system from the ground up. I knew where the weak points were. I also knew how much they ignored my warnings. I sent reports, emails, I even spoke up in meetings. I told them the cloud wasn't enough. I told them ransomware was getting smarter. They brushed me off. "You're just paranoid," Eric would say. "No one uses paper anymore, man." They thought they were untouchable. But they weren't. The attack hit late on a Friday night, just like I knew it would. That's when they'd be least prepared. Monday morning came, and they were dead in the water. It wasn't just the customer data. Payroll was frozen. HR systems were locked up. Contracts, legal files, vendor payments, all encrypted. The worst part? Their secure backups in the cloud had been compromised too. Turns out, they'd been storing backup credentials in the same system. Amateurs. They tried calling me, of course. Desperate calls, texts, even emails. I ignored them. I let them sweat. I let them drown in the mess they'd created. Then, when I knew they were at rock bottom, I sent the notebook. That's when the real chaos started. Because what they didn't know, what I knew, was that Eric had been covering up some serious problems. The company had been hiding data breaches. 3 separate ones, actually, all swept under the rug. They paid off victims, falsified reports, and told the board it was all under control. But I had the proof. I had printed emails, memos, internal reports. I kept it all in the notebook, neatly dated, carefully documented. It wasn't just Eric. The CFO, a guy named Alan, was running side deals with vendors, taking kickbacks for approving inflated contracts. The CEO, Dan, had been funneling money through a dummy consulting firm. I had it all. And when the board saw it, when they realized the notebook wasn't just a lifeline but a ticking bomb, they lost it. They started turning on each other. Eric blamed Alan. Alan blamed Dan. The HR director, Megan, tried to distance herself, but I had notes on her too, covering for toxic managers, ignoring harassment complaints. It was all there. The notebook wasn't just a backup, it was evidence. The company's house of cards was coming down fast. But I wasn't finished. Because as they scrambled, trying to figure out how to fix it, I had already sent copies of certain pages to a few key people, a journalist I trusted, a lawyer I knew, and an ex-employee who had been fired unfairly. They all had a piece of the puzzle now. The company thought they had problems before. They had no idea what was coming next. And I was just getting started. The fallout hit harder than I thought. When the notebook landed on that conference table, it wasn't just the board members losing their minds. It was the whole damn company. The panic spread like wildfire. The CEO tried to hold an emergency meeting to calm everyone down. But it was too late. The thing is, when I mailed the notebook, I didn't just send it to the board. I sent copies of the most explosive pages to a few key employees too. People who had been treated like trash. People who had been laid off suddenly, or denied promotions, or humiliated by management. Like that girl in marketing, Cassie. She had been let go after complaining about harassment from a senior manager. I sent her the page where HR admitted they ignored her complaints to protect the company's image. I sent another page to a guy named Marcus, a quiet IT tech who got fired after he found a vulnerability and reported it. Eric, the CTO, called him a troublemaker. I had a full breakdown in my notes of how Eric covered it up. And I sent a page to a vendor, Jerry, who lost a contract because he wouldn't pay Alan, the CFO, a kickback. I had all the details, dates, amounts, emails. Those people? They weren't quiet anymore. The leaks started. Articles popped up in local news. A journalist I knew ran a story on the hidden breaches. Lawsuits started piling up, wrongful termination, harassment, vendor fraud. I heard Eric was getting death threats. Alan was under investigation for fraud. The CEO? The board was pushing him out fast. But here's where it got even messier. The FBI showed up. Turns out, one of the small data breaches they covered up involved a government contractor. Sensitive information. Now they weren't just looking at lawsuits. They were looking at federal charges. And the board? They were trying to erase their names from everything. But I had records of the votes. I had notes on the closed-door meetings where they all agreed to keep things quiet. They couldn't deny it. Their reputations were crumbling. One of the board members, a woman named Evelyn, tried to get ahead of it. She called me. Left a voicemail. Begging me to talk. She said, I didn't know it was this bad. She knew. They all knew. And I wasn't done yet. Because I had one last card to play. A secret that none of them saw coming. A secret that was buried so deep, even they forgot it existed. But I didn't. And when I decided to release it, I knew it would be the final nail in the coffin. They wanted to pretend they were safe. They weren't. Not by a long shot. I said I had one last card to play. And I did. It was an old note, buried deep in the back of that notebook. Something even I had forgotten until I flipped through those pages one night in my apartment, sipping cheap coffee, watching the chaos unfold on the news. It was about the pension fund. 3 years ago, during a late-night strategy meeting, Eric had casually mentioned reallocating funds from the employee pension account to cover a shortfall in the budget. He joked about it. Said it was temporary. That they'd move the money back once the next round of funding came in. They never did. They used employee retirement money to pay bonuses to the top brass. Millions gone. Stolen. Hidden behind fake accounting entries and fake projections. I'd written it down that night. Date, time, what they said. When I saw it again, I knew. This was it. This was the final hammer. I packaged those pages. Copies of the pension scheme notes, copies of the board meeting minutes where they quietly voted on it, copies of the fake financial statements. I sent them to every employee who worked there. Every single one. Mailed them out in plain brown envelopes. I also sent a copy to the Department of Labor. That's when the real storm hit. Employees started showing up at the building. Dozens of them. People who had worked there for decades. People who were counting on that pension. They were furious. Some of them stormed into the lobby, shouting, demanding answers. Security tried to block them, but it was too late. Cameras were rolling. News vans showed up. Reporters lined up outside the building, sticking microphones in the faces of anyone who walked in or out. The CEO, Dan, tried to give a press conference. He stumbled over his words, sweating through his suit, dodging questions. The reporter from the local station cornered him with a printout from my notebook, the page where I wrote down his exact words from that meeting about the pension fund. Temporary fix. Just a little shuffle. We'll move it back once funding comes in. Dan froze. Cameras flashing in his face. That night, I watched him on TV, his eyes darting around, looking like he was about to pass out. And the fallout kept coming. The FBI raided the office. Agents carrying boxes of files out the front door while the employees chanted, "Where's our money?" The SEC launched an investigation. The Department of Labor started a case on pension fraud. Eric, the CTO? He was arrested. Fraud, obstruction, conspiracy. His smirk was gone. They caught him trying to wipe data from a private server in his house. Idiot. Alan, the CFO, tried to flee the country. They caught him at the airport. He was in handcuffs before he even made it to the gate. Megan, the HR director? Her career was over. Every harassment complaint she'd buried came flooding out. She got named in 3 separate lawsuits. Even Evelyn, the board member who begged me for mercy? Her emails leaked. She knew about everything and did nothing. She got dragged into the mess. Her fancy real estate firm dropped her from the board the same week. The company? Finished. The stock crashed. Investors bailed. Lawsuits piled up. They filed for bankruptcy within 6 months. But here's the part you probably didn't expect, my own karma. See, after all that, I didn't walk away completely clean. The media found me. My name was in the notebook, too. My notes, my handwriting, my involvement. Reporters started asking questions. Why didn't you say something sooner? Why didn't you go public before it got this bad? And they were right. I could have done something earlier. I could have blown the whistle years ago. Maybe people wouldn't have lost their pensions. Maybe some of those employees wouldn't have been screwed over. But I didn't. I kept my head down. I took my paycheck. I stayed quiet because it was easier. When the dust settled, I wasn't charged with anything, but I wasn't celebrated either. No hero headlines. No awards. Just silence. I moved away after that. Sold most of my stuff, rented a cheap apartment in a quiet town. I still carry a notepad everywhere I go. Can't break the habit. Sometimes I see the headlines: lawsuits dragging on, new charges being filed, more dirt coming out. And I think about all the people who were hurt. And I think about what I could have done differently. But in the end, I did what I did. And they got what they deserved. Every last one of them. The company's name? Wiped from the buildings. Their legacy? Just a footnote in some article about corporate fraud and greed. Me? I'm just a guy with a notebook. And that's all I'll ever be.